was a big game night at SoFi Stadium. The crowd was huge and the excitement was in the air. Most people were dressed in designer suits, expensive dresses, and VIP passes hung from their necks. Inside the luxury Skybox, the guests were top-level CEOs, celebrities, tech giants, and billionaires. Everyone had drinks in hand, laughing, talking, and waiting for the game to begin. But then something strange happened. The door opened, and in walked a man no one expected. He wasn't dressed like the others. No designer suit, no security team, not even fancy shoes. Just a plain hoodie, jeans, and soft steps that didn't grab attention. But someone noticed. Someone squinted and whispered, "Wait, is that Keanu Reeves?" Another guest turned to look, and then another. A few guests leaned in, eyes wide, mouths slightly open. Keanu Reeves? Here? Dressed like that? Keanu looked around politely. He didn't smile big or wave. He just gave a small nod to the room and quietly moved to a corner seat, away from the crowd. He wasn't loud. He wasn't trying to be seen. But somehow his silence made people notice him even more. Some guests looked confused, others seemed annoyed. And one man, sitting in the center of the box, legs crossed like a king, didn't look happy at all. That man was the CEO of a powerful tech company, rich, famous, and known for being controlling in every room he entered. He saw Keanu, looked him up and down, and smirked. He leaned toward his assistant and whispered something with a laugh. Then he raised his voice on purpose, just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Hey, who let the janitor in?" He joked, looking straight at Keanu. The room went quiet for a moment. Some guests gave forced laughs, others looked down awkwardly. Keanu didn't react. He didn't get angry. He didn't walk out. He just gave a small smile, nodded again, and turned his eyes back to the game screen. He didn't speak, but his calmness said everything. The CEO wasn't done, though. He wanted attention. He made another joke, this one louder. "Hope he doesn't ask for spare change," he said, raising his glass. More nervous laughter followed, but this time it felt wrong. It wasn't funny, it was mean. But the CEO kept going, saying things like, "This is a luxury box, not a soup kitchen, and maybe he's here to fix the lights." Keanu still didn't speak. He just sat there, peaceful, like he had faced worse before, and maybe he had. Some of the other guests started to feel uncomfortable. A woman leaned toward her friend and whispered, "Why's he doing this to Keanu?" Her friend shrugged, looking uneasy. But no one stood up to the CEO, no one told him to stop. Then a boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, walked over to Keanu. He had been staring at him from across the box, holding a little football in his hands. The boy said shyly, "Are you really Keanu Reeves?" Keanu smiled warmly and said, "Yes, I am." The boy's eyes lit up. "Can I take a picture with you?" Keanu nodded, stood up gently, and posed with the boy. The CEO rolled his eyes, clearly annoyed. "Kids these days," he muttered. "No taste." He tried to pull attention back to himself by loudly talking about his recent company merger, bragging about billions and headlines, but no one was really listening anymore. The air in the room had changed. Something felt off. And people started noticing the kindness in Keanu's face and the coldness in the CEO's. The young boy went back to his seat, smiling, holding the picture on his phone like it was treasure. Keanu sat down again, quietly. Meanwhile, the CEO stood up, trying to regain the room. "Come on, people," he said. "Don't let a little cosplay ruin the vibe." That's when someone else entered the Skybox. The door opened again, and the whole room turned toward it. The energy changed. Instantly, people stood up, clapped, and smiled big. A new celebrity had just walked in. None other than Tom Brady himself, the NFL legend, the champion, the star everyone wanted to meet. He waved to the room, shook a few hands, and smiled politely. The CEO stood up straighter, brushing his jacket, ready to greet Tom like they were close friends, but Tom didn't look at him. He scanned the room once, and then his eyes landed on Keanu sitting near the back. And then, something unexpected happened. Tom Brady walked straight toward Keanu Reeves. Tom Brady didn't walk toward the CEO. He didn't greet the powerful guests or shake hands with rich businessmen. Instead, he walked with purpose, straight toward the quiet man in the hoodie sitting alone. Keanu Reeves. The entire skybox fell silent. People who had been chatting just moments ago stopped mid-sentence. Even the servers paused, holding trays in mid-air. The CEO froze. His confident smile started to fade. He looked confused, maybe even annoyed. Everyone was watching to see what Tom Brady would do, and what he did surprised everyone. Tom's face lit up with a real smile. "Keanu," he said with joy, "I didn't know you'd be here, man." He opened his arms and pulled Keanu into a warm hug like they were old friends. Keanu stood up slowly, still humble, but smiled back and said, "Hey Tom, good to see you." The room felt like it had flipped upside down. The man the CEO had mocked just moments ago was now being treated like a brother by one of the most respected athletes in the world. Guests whispered quietly, looking at each other. Some raised their eyebrows, others looked embarrassed. A few even began to question how they had judged Keanu before. Tom clapped Keanu on the back and said, "Mind if I sit next to you?" Keanu nodded. "Please." And just like that, the two sat down together side by side. The CEO stood frozen, his mouth open but no words coming out. He tried to cover the awkward moment by laughing loudly and saying, "Well, what do you know? Celebrities stick together." But his voice sounded forced, fake. Tom ignored him completely, not even glancing his way. His focus was on Keanu, and the room noticed it. Tom leaned closer to Keanu and asked softly, "Everything all right?" Keanu gave a small shrug. "Just trying to enjoy the game." Tom's face changed. He could tell something had happened, but he didn't press. Instead, he gave a calm nod and looked at the screen. The CEO tried again, walking over with a drink in hand. "Tom, great to see you here, buddy," he said loudly, holding out the glass. Tom finally looked at him, just for a second, and said, "I'm good, thanks." The CEO's face twitched. He wasn't used to being ignored. He turned to the guests and tried to laugh it off. "Keanu here's been keeping the box lively," he joked, but no one laughed this time. In fact, some of the guests looked away, not wanting to be part of the awkward moment. Tom glanced around the room, then looked back at Keanu. "You good sitting here?" he asked again. Keanu smiled and nodded. "Yeah, I'm okay." But it was clear that Tom knew something had gone wrong. He could sense the tension in the room and the way Keanu had been treated before he arrived. Then something small, but powerful, happened. The young boy who had earlier taken a picture with Keanu came back holding his phone. "Mr. Tom Brady," the boy said shyly. "Can I take a picture with both of you?" Tom smiled big. "Of course," he said, and waved him over. The boy stood between them, and the stadium staff took the photo. Keanu and Tom both smiled, and the boy beamed with joy. The CEO stood off to the side, watching with growing frustration. He wasn't the center of attention anymore, and it bothered him. Tom ruffled the boy's hair and said, "You've got good taste in heroes." The boy nodded and said, "My dad told me Mr. Keanu helps poor kids in hospitals." Tom looked at Keanu and nodded. "That's right, he does." The CEO tried one last time to take control of the room. "Let's get back to the game, everyone," he shouted. "Enough fanboy moments." But no one was listening. The guests were now more interested in Keanu than him. A few of them even moved closer to where Tom and Keanu were sitting, slowly leaving the CEO's side of the skybox empty. The CEO walked back to his original seat, clearly irritated. He looked at his phone and sipped his drink, but his eyes kept darting toward the corner where Tom and Keanu sat, whispering and laughing together like true friends. The power had shifted and everyone knew it. One woman whispered to her friend, "I didn't know they were friends." Her friend replied, "I didn't even know Keanu was so kind." And that's when something changed in the room. People began to realize they had judged too quickly. They had followed the CEO's lead, and now they felt ashamed of it. The respect that had once belonged to the CEO was now with the man in the hoodie, not because he was famous, but because he had remained calm and kind in the face of public humiliation, and because someone like Tom Brady, respected by millions, chose to stand by him without saying a single harsh word. That moment told everyone what kind of man Keanu really was, and what kind of man the CEO had shown himself to be. The game on the field had started, but inside the skybox, The real game was something else. It was a game of power, respect, and truth. And it was clear that the balance had shifted. The man everyone had ignored, Keanu Reeves, was now the center of quiet attention. And the man who thought he ruled the room, the arrogant CEO, was now sitting in silence, his fake smile slipping every second. Tom Brady and Keanu Reeves sat side by side, watching the game and talking like old friends. Tom didn't care who else was in the room. He had chosen his place, and that place was next to Keanu. Their conversation wasn't loud, but people near them could hear bits and pieces, and what they heard made them lean in even closer. Tom asked Keanu about his foundation. "You still working with those kids in the cancer ward?" he said gently. Keanu nodded. "What?" "Yeah, we just built another wing in the hospital last month." A few guests who were pretending not to listen suddenly looked up. One woman whispered, "What hospital?" Another man said softly, "He never talks about that in interviews." Keanu shrugged. "It's not about cameras," he said. "It's about helping." Those simple words hit harder than any speech the CEO had ever given. Keanu didn't brag. He didn't post online about his donations or flash his kindness. He just lived it quietly, and that's what made people respect him even more. Meanwhile, the CEO sat with his drink, watching everything. His smile was gone now, replaced with something darker, jealousy, anger, maybe even fear, for the first time. He wasn't the most powerful person in the room, and he hated that feeling. He leaned toward one of his assistants and whispered something, trying to control the room again. But no one was paying attention to him anymore. The mood had changed, and he could feel it slipping through his fingers like sand. People were now moving closer to Tom and Keanu, not him. Guests were asking Keanu questions, wanting to hear his soft, honest answers. One man asked Keanu, "Is it true you gave away most of your salary from that movie?" Keanu smiled and said, "Money means nothing if it can't be used to help others." Another person added, "You paid your crew's rent during the strike, right?" Keanu nodded. "They have families. I just did what I could." Tom looked proud. He clapped Keanu on the back and said, "That's why I respect this man more than any award winner." The guests clapped quietly. Some even smiled warmly. The CEO clenched his jaw but said nothing. He knew he couldn't fight that kind of respect. Not with money, not with status, not with fake charm. A young server walked by holding a tray of drinks. She looked nervous, clearly aware of the tension in the room. Keanu gently took a glass and smiled at her. "Thank you," he said. She blinked, surprised. "You're welcome, sir," she whispered. The CEO, who had been snapping fingers at staff earlier, noticed the moment and felt it sting. Tom leaned in closer to Keanu and said something only he could hear. Keanu nodded and replied softly. Whatever they said made Tom laugh, relaxed and natural. Everyone could see their bond was real, built on years of respect, not just fame. The CEO, meanwhile, had no real friends there, just people who used to laugh at his jokes and follow his lead. Now, those same people were quiet, unsure, embarrassed even. They had seen the truth, and it didn't need to be shouted. It was simple. Kindness spoke louder than arrogance, and Keanu had won without saying a single harsh word. Tom finally turned to the room and said casually, "You know what I like about Keanu?" Everyone looked up, even the CEO. He doesn't wear his fame like a crown. He wears it like a coat, easy to take off when someone needs it more. A deep silence followed. The words hit everyone like a soft but powerful wave. They felt honest, beautiful and true. The CEO tried one last time to laugh. "Well, not all of us can be saints, right?" he joked. But his voice was weak and no one laughed this time. Even his assistant avoided eye contact. Keanu just smiled politely and took another sip of his drink. He didn't need to say anything. The room had already chosen who to respect. As the game went on, Keanu remained quiet and kind. Tom stayed beside him. And slowly, one by one, the guests began to move closer to them, asking questions, offering compliments. Some even apologized for not recognizing him at first. Keanu accepted. It all with grace, never once acting proud or angry. And the CEO? He sat in the corner now, forgotten, not because he was poor or powerless, but because he had shown his true character. And in that skybox, surrounded by wealth, it was humility that stood the tallest. The game continued outside on the field, but inside the skybox people were focused on something else. Keanu Reeves and Tom Brady sat together, calm and relaxed, like old friends catching up after years. Guests who once ignored Keanu were now leaning forward to hear what he said. His soft voice and humble answers made people feel something deep. Respect. The CEO sat across the room, his drink untouched, his fake smile completely gone. He had lost the room and he knew it. The CEO tried to stay important. He looked at his assistant and whispered loudly, "Get the media team on the phone, I want pictures with Tom." But Tom wasn't even looking his way. He was fully focused on Keanu. They talked about life, kindness, motorcycles, and giving without expecting anything back. Keanu told Tom, "The best feeling is helping someone who can't repay you." Tom nodded. "That's the real win." A few guests clapped softly. Others looked ashamed, remembering how they laughed earlier when the CEO insulted Keanu. One guest, a woman, in a red dress, finally spoke up. "I judged him wrong. I thought he didn't belong here, but now I feel embarrassed." Her friend nodded. "Me too." The CEO heard it. His jaw tightened. His fingers gripped the edge of his seat. He couldn't believe what was happening. This was supposed to be his moment, his box, his show. But now, all eyes were on the man he had mocked and the star who stood beside him. The CEO stood up, trying once again to control the moment. "Let's toast to success," he said loudly, raising his glass, "to those who built empires and lead from the front." A few people raised their glasses politely, but most just looked away. It felt forced, fake, and desperate. Tom looked at Keanu and whispered something with a small grin. Keanu chuckled. The CEO noticed and felt heat rise in his face. He took a step forward, walking toward them, trying to make the moment his. "Tom," he said, "you know, I've always respected your game, your work ethic. Maybe next season you can help me train my board." Tom looked up slowly. His eyes weren't angry, but they weren't soft either. He smiled politely and said, "Training takes time and you've got to start with character." The room went quiet again. That one line cut through all the noise. The CEO opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. He stepped back slowly, defeated without anyone yelling. Then, something happened that no one expected. A young stadium janitor walked in to pick up empty glasses. She was maybe 20 years old, wearing a simple uniform. Her hands were shaking a little, nervous to be in such a room full of powerful people. She bent down to take a glass near Keanu's chair, but before she could, Keanu stood up, picked up the tray himself, and handed it to her with both hands. "Thank you for your hard work," he said gently. She stared at him in shock, her mouth opened slightly. You're Keanu Reeves," she whispered. Keanu smiled and nodded. "I'm just a guest like you." She didn't know what to say, but her eyes filled with tears. "You're the first person to ever say thank you to me in this room." That moment broke something inside the skybox. A few guests wiped their eyes, others clapped again, real applause this time. The CEO turned his back, unable to face the truth of the moment. The janitor left with the tray, but her smile stayed. Keanu sat down again like nothing had happened, but everyone there knew something had changed. Tom looked around the room and then said in a quiet voice that still carried power, "Fame doesn't make a person great, how they treat others does." He didn't shout. He didn't raise his voice, but the message landed like thunder. Everyone felt it, especially the CEO. Now people were walking over to Keanu, not with cameras, but with real questions. One older man asked, "What's your secret to staying grounded?" Keanu smiled. "Pain teaches you, losing people teaches you, and helping others, that saves you." Another guest asked, "How do you stay kind in this industry?" Keanu replied, "By remembering where I came from and who still needs help." Tom smiled proudly, saying nothing, just letting Keanu shine. The CEO sat alone now, no one beside him. He had mocked a man who didn't fight back, and now that man had the entire room on his side, not through anger, not through shouting, but through simple, quiet kindness. And when the CEO looked around again, he finally understood something. Respect can't be bought, and pride can't hide weakness. Forever. In trying to shame Keanu, he had only exposed himself, and Keanu, he stayed exactly the same, just a man in a hoodie watching the game, giving thanks and making people feel seen. As the game entered the second half, most guests in the Skybox had stopped watching it. Their eyes and ears were now on Keanu Reeves. He didn't try to impress anyone. He didn't raise his voice or show off, but his calm words and gentle nature made everyone feel something strong, something real. Tom Brady stayed beside him, smiling now and then, nodding as Keanu spoke about his past, about the people he had helped and the quiet battles he had fought behind the cameras. Guests leaned closer, not wanting to miss a word. It felt like they were listening to a story from someone who had lived through storms, but never stopped. Being kind, a man in his 40s finally asked a question that many had in their minds. "Why don't you ever talk about all the good you do, Keanu?" Keanu looked at him and said, "Because it's not about me, it's about the people who need help." That one sentence made the room silent again. Everyone understood that he wasn't trying to be humble. He just truly meant it. One woman, near the window, quietly said, "I used to think actors were just about red carpets, but I was wrong." She looked at Keanu and smiled. "Thank you for being different." He nodded politely, giving no long speech, just a simple thank you. The CEO, sitting a few feet away, was watching all of this. His fingers tapped his glass slowly, but his face showed something strange. Confusion mixed with anger and something else. Maybe it was regret, or maybe it was fear. He had tried to humiliate Keanu in front of everyone, and now he couldn't even get one person to laugh at his jokes. He stood up and walked over again, pretending to stretch, hoping to enter the conversation. "That's all nice, Keanu," he said loudly, "but let's be real. This is the entertainment business, not a charity." The room froze for a second. Some guests looked down, some looked toward Tom, wondering what he'd say. Tom turned to the CEO and replied calmly, "You know, I've won championships, broken records, stood on the biggest stages, but none of that means anything if you can't treat people with respect." His voice was soft, but it felt like a hammer hitting stone. The CEO blinked and tried to laugh it off. "I was just making a point." Keanu stayed silent. His silence was powerful, and his eyes looked directly at the CEO. Not angry, not afraid, just calm. "You're right," Keanu said gently. "This is the entertainment business, but we're still human, and humans should care for each other." The words were soft, but they echoed loudly in the hearts of everyone listening. Now even the CEO's assistant took a step back. Uncomfortable to stand near him. The man who once controlled the room with fear and status now stood alone. Tom leaned forward and told the group, "You know, Keanu once gave his entire Matrix salary to crew members who were underpaid, not for publicity, not for likes, just because it was the right thing to do." Gasps filled the room. A young woman near the back said, "I read something like that. I thought it was a rumor." Tom shook his head. "It's true." Keanu looked down, clearly uncomfortable with the praise, but he didn't deny it. He just said, "They worked hard. I just shared what I had." The atmosphere in the box had transformed. People no longer looked at Keanu as just a movie star. They saw him as something much more. A man with a heart. A man who gave without asking for anything in return. A man who carried pain, but still chose kindness every day. The boy who had taken a picture earlier came back again holding his football. "Mr. Keanu," he said shyly. "Can you sign this?" Keanu smiled, took a pen from the table and signed the ball carefully. The boy looked up and said, "You're my hero now, not just because you're in movies, but because you're nice to everyone." Keanu smiled warmly and handed the ball. "That means a lot, kid," he said softly. The room felt warmer, like something special had happened, not because of a big speech, but because of small, real actions that touched hearts. The CEO sat back down slowly, his pride shrinking by the second. He watched as everyone he once tried to impress now looked at someone else, someone who didn't even try. That hurt more than he expected. And maybe for the first time in a long while he started to question himself. Tom Brady looked around and said, "You don't need money or fame to be respected, you just need heart." Everyone nodded, even the servers, even the janitor standing by the door. Everyone had seen what true kindness looked like, and in that moment, inside a luxury skybox full of money and fame, the most powerful person was the quiet man in the hoodie, Keanu Reeves. Not because of who he was on screen, but because of who he was when no one was watching. The lights from the stadium glowed through the wide glass windows of the skybox, but inside, the real light was coming from something else, something that couldn't be seen, only felt. Keanu Reeves sat quietly beside Tom Brady, yet his silence was more powerful than any voice. The guests who once ignored him were now hanging on to every word, every glance, every gesture. The room had changed, and everyone knew it. Tom looked around at the guests and said, "You know, we meet so many people in our lives, some come to take, some come to impress. But once in a while you meet someone who just gives, without noise, without reason." He looked at Keanu with a proud smile. Keanu nodded gently, not saying much, just showing thanks with his eyes. The woman in the red dress who had once laughed at the CEO's joke now stepped forward. She had tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I laughed when he mocked you earlier, and now I feel ashamed." Keanu stood up and walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "It's all right," he said. "We all learn things at different times." Those simple words made her cry. She had never seen such grace before. She wasn't used to someone being so kind even after being treated badly. The rest of the room fell silent. The only sound was the muffled cheers from the field far below. But no one cared about the score anymore. One of the security guards near the door stepped forward, holding a photo. "Mr. Reeves," he said, "I met you 5 years ago. You were filming in our neighborhood. You gave my son your signed jacket when he was sick." Keanu took the photo and smiled. "I remember," he said. "How's he doing now?" The guard replied, "He's healthy now thanks to you. You gave him hope that day." More gasps filled the room, not just because of the story, but because Keanu remembered. He had met thousands of people in his life, but he still remembered the name of a boy he helped 5 years ago. The guests looked at him with fresh eyes. They weren't looking at a celebrity anymore. They were looking at a rare human being. The CEO, sitting in the corner with a tight face, had heard every word. He looked around and saw that no one was listening to him anymore. Not one person had asked him a single question in over an hour. His assistant stood far away now, pretending not to know him. It was quiet punishment, and it was working. Tom Brady got up and stretched. He looked around the room, then pointed to Keanu. "This man right here," he said, "is what it means to be a legend, not just in movies, but in life." Everyone clapped, not because they were told to, but because they felt it deep in their hearts. Keanu looked uncomfortable with the attention. "I'm just a guy trying to be decent," he said. But that's exactly why they respected him, because he wasn't trying to win anyone over. He wasn't chasing fame or control. He just showed up, stayed kind, and didn't let hate change him. One of the older men who had once sat beside the CEO now walked toward Keanu and said, "My son is sick. He loves your movies. Would you mind saying a message for him?" Keanu said, "Of course," and the man held up his phone. Keanu looked into the camera and said, "Hey buddy, I'm thinking of you. Stay strong, and remember, you're braver than you feel." The man broke into tears and hugged Keanu. "Thank you," he whispered. And again, the room clapped, even the staff members who had been quietly cleaning near the back. At that moment, the CEO stood up again, trying one last time to reclaim attention. "Okay, I get it," he said loudly. "You're all in love with this guy, but this is still my skybox." But his voice was shaky, no longer strong. The guests turned slowly to look at him, not with anger, but with disappointment. Tom walked over to him and said calmly, "You had your moment, and you chose to use it to belittle someone. Now the room has chosen someone else, and it wasn't about fame, it was about heart." The CEO didn't reply. His lips moved, but no words came out. He sat down again, defeated by kindness. Keanu didn't speak against the CEO, not even once. He never raised his voice, never insulted, never tried to get back at him, and yet he had won everything. Respect, love, and admiration just by being himself. And in that skybox full of power and pride, people finally saw the truth. The richest person wasn't the one with the biggest bank account, but the one with the biggest heart. By now, the football game had become background noise. No one in the skybox really cared about the score anymore. Their focus was on something far more real, far more powerful than any touchdown or victory. All eyes were still on Keanu Reeves, the man who entered the skybox in a hoodie and was mocked for it, and now stood as the most respected person in the room. One by one, the guests who had first laughed with the CEO were moving away from him. Their bodies turned slightly, their chairs shifted, even their smiles had changed direction. The CEO noticed this and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Loneliness. True, cold loneliness in a room full of people. A younger guest who had earlier clung to the CEO's every word, now stood near Keanu with a cup in his hand. "You know," he said, "I always thought success was about power, but tonight, I think I was wrong." Keanu looked at him kindly and replied, "Power fades, but kindness stays." The guest nodded slowly, like someone hearing the truth for the first time. Brady gave a proud smile and stood beside Keanu like a shield, not because Keanu needed protection, but because Tom wanted to make a statement. He stood with him, not just physically but with his heart, and that silent support made the message even louder. The CEO sat in the corner, shifting in his chair. He had run out of things to say, and no one was laughing at his forced jokes anymore. His phone buzzed, on the table, but he didn't pick it up. Even the device couldn't save him from the feeling building inside, the feeling of being small. The assistant who had been with the CEO earlier now stood near the back, closer to the servers than her boss. She crossed her arms and watched Keanu quietly, and even she couldn't hide her admiration anymore. The atmosphere in the room had changed completely. The tension was gone, replaced by something peaceful, something honest. Another guest stepped forward and asked Keanu, "How do you stay so calm, so untouched by all this noise?" Keanu gave a gentle smile and answered, "Because life is short and pain is long, I choose peace whenever I can." His voice wasn't loud, but everyone heard it and everyone felt it. The janitor from earlier returned, this time not to clean, but to stand quietly near the doorway and watch. Her eyes were filled with emotion, and Keanu noticed her right away. He gave her a small wave, and she covered her mouth with her hand, holding back tears. No celebrity had ever treated her like a person before, but Keanu did, without thinking twice. Tom looked around the room and said softly, "You don't need a cape to be a hero. Sometimes you just need to be decent." That line made several guests pause and reflect. They thought about all the times they chased money, praise, or fame, and how empty it all felt compared to the quiet dignity they saw in Keanu now. Then something unexpected happened. One of the investors, an older man with sharp eyes, walked toward the CEO and said, "I came here tonight hoping to meet powerful people, but I've just realized something. Power without grace is nothing." He turned his back on the CEO and walked toward Keanu, offering a firm handshake. "It's an honor, sir," he said. The CEO's face turned pale. His power was slipping away like water through his fingers. He stood up once more, hoping to speak, to reclaim control, but his voice cracked. "This is still my skybox," he muttered. No one responded. Not even a single glance came his way. Tom finally spoke again, looking toward the CEO one last time. "It's yours by title, not by spirit," he said calmly. "This room belongs to the one who earned the respect in it." And in that moment, everyone agreed without a vote, without a word. They simply knew it was true. The room now stood with Keanu, not because of his movies, not because of his fame, but because of his heart, his humility, and his humanity. He had taken every insult with grace, every moment with patience, and had given back only kindness in return. And in doing so, he had become the most important man in that skybox, without ever trying to be. The CEO sat down again, this time with his head lowered. There were no speeches left, no jokes, no power plays, just silence. And maybe, just maybe, the silence was teaching him something he had never learned before. Keanu looked around at the people now surrounding him. The young boy with the football, the janitor with tears in her eyes, the guests who had once judged him, and the NFL legend who never left his side. He didn't say much, but his eyes said everything. Thank you. And it's okay. That night wasn't about football anymore. It had become something else entirely. It was a lesson, a reminder, a quiet storm that left the room forever changed. The game was over, but no one in the skybox noticed when it ended. People were still gathered around Keanu Reeves, talking to him, thanking him, listening to his quiet words like they were lessons from a man who had truly lived. Tom Brady stood nearby, still smiling with pride. He hadn't left Keanu's side the entire evening, not even once. Outside the windows, fans were cheering, the stadium lights shining bright. But inside the skybox, it felt like time had slowed down. Something had changed in the hearts of everyone present. A shift had happened, not with noise or power, but with calm truth, humility, and kindness. As guests began to say their goodbyes, many of them walked up to Keanu. Some shook his hand, others hugged him gently. A few apologized again for not treating him with respect at the start. Keanu forgave everyone without a single word of anger. "We all learn," he said softly. "That's the point of life." Even the janitor who had stood in the doorway for so long finally stepped forward. Her voice trembled as she said, "Thank you for seeing me." Keanu looked at her with warmth and replied, "Thank you for all you do." She nodded with tears in her eyes, holding that moment in her heart like a gift. Tom Brady checked his watch, then turned to Keanu. "You heading out?" Keanu nodded. "Yeah, I think it's time." The two men walked slowly toward the skybox exit. Guests moved out of their way with quiet respect, not because they were famous, but because they had earned something bigger. Admiration. The CEO sat alone in the corner, no one near him, no one talking to him. His drink had melted into water. His smile was gone, and so was the control he once held over the room. He watched as Keanu passed by, wondering how everything slipped through his fingers so quickly. He had the box, the suit, the money, yet none of it mattered anymore. Just as Keanu reached the door, he turned one last time. His eyes moved slowly across the room, stopping briefly. On the CEO, there was no hate in his face, no revenge, just a calm expression. Then he gave a small nod, as if to say, "I forgive you," and walked out without another word. The CEO lowered his head. Something inside him cracked, not from anger, but from truth. He had seen something rare tonight, and it had humbled him quietly and completely. Later that night, a photo appeared on social media. It showed Tom Brady and Keanu Reeves walking out of the stadium together. No security, no big crowd, just two men talking like old friends. Behind them, the lights of the stadium glowed in the dark, and in the caption someone had written, "The richest man in the room didn't wear a suit." The post went viral within hours. Thousands of people shared their stories about Keanu, how he helped fans, gave to hospitals, treated strangers with love and respect. No one mentioned the CEO, not once. It was like he had been erased from the story entirely. The next morning, major news outlets picked up the story, not because of a football score, but because of what happened in that one skybox, one headline. "Rid, Tom Brady stands with Keanu Reeves. After CEO tries to shame him." Another said, "True class, Keanu turns insult into inspiration." People all around the world were talking about kindness, about humility, about how respect must be earned, not demanded. And the message reached millions, young and old, rich and poor, famous and unknown. Tom Brady never posted anything about it, and neither did Keanu. But the people in the room would never forget what they saw, because what happened that night wasn't just about celebrities or sports. It was about something deeper, something rare. It was about a man who walked into a room full of pride and showed everyone that true greatness doesn't speak loudly. It whispers, it gives, It forgives. It listens. It lifts others up without needing the spotlight. And that man was Keanu Reeves. The skybox where it all happened is still there, still filled with expensive chairs, glass walls, and silver trays. But to those who were present, it's remembered as the place where a silent storm came through and swept away all the arrogance, leaving only truth behind. And somewhere, someone is still telling the story of the man in the hoodie, the quiet actor, the kind soul who was mocked, yet never fought back, because he didn't need to. He already had the only thing that matters in the end: real respect.